This is DevOps in Agile Way podcast.
Hello everyone, and this is the new episode of the podcast where I will have a discussion with our great guest. So I have honor today to talk with Sam Williams, and if you are not familiar with him, shame on you. You should go to LinkedIn, check his profile, because there is a lot of interesting stuff about serverless, and especially about the topic which is quite close to me, about the certifications. Well, we both have very similar perception on certifications. Probably some of you will be not very happy with that, but I think this is very important and very urgent topic today in the IT market. So, Sam, first of all, thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, and I'm really happy that you are with me today. Yeah, so if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, how it come that that serverless from one side, because you describe yourself in LinkedIn as serverless obsessive, right? And
Yes,
the
I am.
certifications on the second side, how it came together, and
Yep. So I got into serverless purely by accident. I was a mid-level software developer looking for a new job and started or found a job at a startup. And basically, they said, "Oh, by the way, we are AWS only and serverless only." So that was a bit of a surprise because at the time I'd used a bit of AWS, but basically just spun up an EC2. So I had to learn all about Lambdas, how to API gateway, DynamoDB, and start building applications really fast because it's a startup. So everything is super fast paced.
yeah.
And kind of when I was starting to learn about all these kind of things, I kind of realized that there wasn't that much useful content out there. There was like the AWS docs, which were very dry and were very, well, sometimes they were just outdated, sometimes they were just wrong. And I felt that there was not that much, there wasn't the information I expected. Like when I learned Express or like Node, there were really good tutorials, really good videos. So it started off that I just wanted to make the serverless tutorials I wish I had when I was first learning. And that's kind of where I'd already done like some general tech tutorials online. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to make some tutorials about Lambda, API Gateway, Amazon Lex, and those kind of things. And it kind of just blew up from there. Some of my earliest videos now have like hundreds of thousands of views. And I was like, and I got messages from people saying like this, like I spent hours trying to solve this problem. I found your video, and 5 minutes later, I had a working product. And kind of being able to really actively help people and like help people learn a skill that is like so valuable. I think we'll probably talk about this a bit more later, but like serverless as a tool set just allows you to have so much more power and so much more. It allows you to utilize your time better instead of spending all your time managing server redundancy and failover protocols and all that kind of stuff. You can just go, here's the business requirement or here's the customer's request. How do I fulfill that by using tools that I know are going to be resilient?
Yeah, that's really cool, and that the great content is defending itself, right? So yeah, I don't need to say that, but really I congratulate you to have this amount of good feedbacks and people happy with that. And you know what is sad, and this is a little bit crazy. What you said ticked me, because you said you wanted to create something what you wish to have when you started. I had the same feeling so many times. Of course, this is the opportunity for us to create something, but it is in fact a little bit sad that we need to always create something to fulfill our own needs, right?
Yeah, there's definitely. I don't know. I think that AWS is great with a lot of things, and with some of the larger services, it's really good. Very well documented, very well organized. But I think like although there are some incredibly skilled engineers and designers and architects at AWS, even some of them that are making really good content and really good like labs. I just think the dispersion of that, like trying to find the DynamoDB labs, which I did a couple of years ago and was
Mhm.
really insightful. Trying to find that, knowing that it already exists, is really hard work. So I don't
Mhm.
know how someone who doesn't know it exists can find those resources. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's
that's true. And with approach like serverless, we have another layer of problem, right? Because when you have EC2 instance or whatever, just the virtual machine, you install stuff there and you can experiment because you have immediate response in logs, right? And here, those logs from serverless are, in the best way to say, like very limited, right? You need to have more knowledge to make this more informative, and this, I think, this also plays a role with the entry point to approaches like serverless.
yeah. The feedback loop can be it. I think it's just a very different development experience. People are used to, I write the code locally. I run npm start to have my local server running, and that's kind of the way that 95% of developers are used to working. So as soon as it's like, oh, by the way, this might not work exactly the same as on your locally emulated machine, it's like, oh, that's different. And the concept of like always like only really doing your proper testing in a deployed environment, like that's very alien, and that kind of also
Yeah,
changes the design process, the development process, and especially the testing processes that need to be
yeah.
surrounded by it. And kind of a lot of that is still being like worked on today. There's still new startups and still new products and services that are helping make especially serverless development a lot easier to understand and a lot easier to manage and a lot easier to kind of ensure that you're throughputting both a decent amount of like a decent number of features, but also resilient and high performance features. And I think like that was one of the things that originally, because complete coding moved from just being video tutorials. At some point, I got some messages from some CTOs and some tech leaders, and they were like, "We love this video, but can you help us do this?" Or, "We love your video. We've built this thing, but it's really flaky. Can you
Hmm.
advise us on how to architect it better?" And that kind of led into what I now do as about half of my time, which is consulting with usually startups using serverless to basically help them make the most of it, because there are a lot of things that are kind of implicit that aren't outlined, like here is your step 1, step 2, step 3, you've now got a resilient system, because you've abstracted a lot of the code complexity into architecture complexity. That's it changes the complexity dynamics. So because it's a newer system and there are less really skilled architects, it's just a different approach that is needed. And that's one thing that I find I spend most of my time doing with clients, is trying to get like a really strong foundation of like even just like organizational practices, deployment practices,
Hmm.
before we even get onto, okay, now let's get onto the nitty gritty of like what event bridge uh, structure should we use, or do we need to use DynamoDB, TTLs, and streams? Like before any of that, it's the higher level, like how does this affect our normal development processes?
Yeah, that's true, and I cannot agree more with you here because this the composition of application and the systems leads us to. I said it a couple of times that the nature nothing can be lost, right? So we improve something, or maybe not improve, but let's say if the energy is going somewhere, it needs to be taken from somewhere, right? So if we have easier system, let's say in theory easier system like serverless, we need to have something more complicated, and this is the process around it, right? And I wonder, because I have still in mind about this discussion about the certification, but as we started this part of the topic, this it is quite interesting for me how you encapsulate this like this soft part, right? Because this is not like a let's call it real engineering, right? Someone is just bumping into a keyboard and write the code. How you incorporate this in your trainings?
Okay, so in my training, well, it started off with just YouTube videos, and I find that being able to, I think being able to build something is kind of the first step, because the complexity before you can get onto the really complex parts of how you are engineering, how you are architecting something, if you don't have a fundamental understanding of how it all works,
Mm,
then it doesn't there's no point really being able to know, oh, well, actually, like, Lambda has a auto scaling limit, so it can't scale at a certain rate. There's no point knowing that if you can't properly provision Lambdas. So I think learning and moving up the complexity ladder is one thing I always try and do. So with my video lessons and with my course that I now have, it always starts relatively simple and then adds on to that.
mhm,
And then once you've got the practical experience, you can then focus in on kind of the more architectural things, where, because you know how it's going to work, you know some of the limitations, you can start thinking about how different limitations play off each other, how to
mhm.
use how, like, the limitation of one system or one service can be mitigated by using another service. And I think, yeah, trying to explain all of that is a very challenging topic. And I'm planning to do some more architectural, serverless architecture videos and
Mhm.
courses in the future, and trying to, I think the best way to learn often is, well, almost always, is by doing it, trying it out, seeing how it breaks, because inevitably it will break, because that's life.
Yeah. Oh
And
yes.
then it's saying, oh, okay, that broke in that method or that mechanism. Why did it break? How, and then over time you build up basically a portfolio of patterns that you know are secure. And then architecture becomes, instead of just going and having to architect it all in code, it's more like I have blocks of architecture that achieve, I call it sub functionality. So
Mm,
it's not here is a function. It's here's how I do search, or here's how I do time delay functionality, and then you can start bolting these together to create the functionality that you're actually looking to implement.
yeah, that's cool. And with teaching others, because we can say it is kind of teaching, right? Even if you do it online and let's say with serverless work in asynchronous mode, right? So you don't have like a instant feedback, you don't have your students next to you. It is something what is in some service, and someone can watch it in even a couple of years later. It is quite tough to be a good teacher, even if you are very good engineer. Teaching and passing the knowledge to others is really, really something else. So, if I may ask you, how you deal with that on the beginning of your journey with explaining things? So, did you have the
That
moment, oh damn it, I just need to just throw it away because those people don't understand what I'm talking about, and things like that?
that's a really good question. I think I'm quite lucky that, well, I'm quite lucky that I have a background where I have done bits of teaching. So I used to, in a completely unrelated field, I used to do climbing coaching, like
Mm,
rock climbing coaching. And with that, if you just say, put your left hand here, put your right hand here, put your left foot there, and you basically tell them exactly what to do, they'll get to the top of the climb. But when they try the climb next to them, they're like, okay, what do I do now? And they become reliant on you. So becoming a really good coach in climbing was about teaching them the skills to figure it out themselves. And I think that applies incredibly well to basically anything. Like,
mm,
to be a good teacher, you're teaching them how to solve problems themselves. And so I think from the start I had a bit of an advantage, but also I think I've now have like 120 videos on YouTube or something ridiculous like that, and I've got probably another 150 written articles. So
mm.
I've got a lot better. If I look back at some of my early videos, I am absolutely horrified at how badly I'm teaching them. But it's just something you pick up. And yeah, I think if people out there are wanting to get into creating tutorials or creating videos or courses or whatever it is, I think having some practice where you do get that instant feedback early on. So like I'm planning to do some future courses, and whenever I do those, I'm going to run that with a small group of 5 to 10 people,
Mhm.
and I'm going to run it like once a week. We'll have a call. I'll do the content, give them some exercises to go away. Next week they'll come back, because that gives me the feedback on like, what did I not explain well?
Mhm.
What can I improve on, or what can I add, or what did everyone already knew about that topic, so that can save me 5 minutes. So I think, yeah, if you can just do that. There's loads of meetups out there that you can go and do talks. There's loads of like organizations and those kind of things that do like even online meetups where it's more like we're kind of going to work through a challenge together. And if you
Mhm.
can go as a more mid-level or senior engineer or developer and just go and say, actually, I'm going to go and I'm kind of just going to help the other people there. That can be a really nice way to work on your teaching skills, would be my suggestion.
That's great advice, and anyone of our audience, if you plan to go into this, help others to be better, please remember what Sam said, because this is really really important to build this trust, right? That you first of all you know what you talk about, you care about the students, and also not doing things for them. Or what I mean is what exactly you said: put your hand here, put your leg there. It means that you, of course, as you said, they will reach the goal in this specific task, and that's it. That's why I've done the same thing really during the DevOps Academy. We had, for example, the tasks for the people who, most of them never worked in teams. We've done something like that, that for example, a group of 15 people was split to 3 groups, and I just said to them, you work as a group, this is your task. And I saw in their eyes, like, the death is coming, right? The point here was, I explained that I can say to you exactly, I can explain to you exactly what you need to do in this teamwork, and you will do it, and you will be successful, you will deliver this small project. But my goal is you to fail, because this is your safe environment where we can talk about this, where you can see what kind of challenges are waiting for you. The same, like you said, if you put your hand in the wrong part of the rock, you will learn something. This is the safe environment where you take care, where you secure those people, and they can learn easily and without, let's say, fear. I'm not sure I have this fear, so I will not do it. But anyway, this is really great advice, and I think I mentioned about the trust. And do you believe building this trust as a trainer, especially as a online trainer somewhere away from me, is important? Because for example, if we have the training which is, I don't know, 2, 3, 5, 8 hours long, do I need to build this trust? Because what is the reason to do that?
Yeah, so I think you do. And I think the reason for that is because it's not, it's the time investment of, it's a like spending 4 hours or 8 hours of your time watching someone else's course. That's a big chunk of time. You could be spending that with your family. You could be out having fun. You could be like working more hours if you're a contractor, or you could be trying to find some freelancing work and earning some extra money. So you're choosing to spend that time. If they don't trust that you know what you're doing, if they don't trust that you're going to help them achieve their goals, if they don't trust that the outcomes that they're looking for are attainable and you're going to help them get there, then why would they spend that time? This is even more the case with paid courses, because it's also a financial investment. And I've found through with my course and through my YouTube that at the start it was very easy, because most of the people who were buying a course from me were people who had watched 100 hours or 20 hours of my free YouTube videos, or had been chatting with me on LinkedIn for the past 3 or 4 months. And so when I said I've got a course, they know, oh, perfect. I know that he knows what he's talking about. Those videos were awesome, or that video helped me solve a problem. So I'm sure this course will be great. But when it gets to people who haven't been exposed to you, who maybe haven't seen, in my case, my YouTube videos or my articles, or haven't seen me on LinkedIn, there's a lot more of those questions of like, who are you? Why do you think you can help me? And I think, yeah, trying to build that trust first makes the not, you don't have to convince them. Well, you kind of do. You kind of have to convince them to invest their time completing your course, or even just like watching your free video. If it's 15 minutes, they could be watching some memes or watching cat videos for 15 minutes, but they're spending those 15 minutes. So there's little things you can do to try and build that trust initially. But I think one of the best ways is just having a big catalog of content that you've made. And the only way to get started with that is just start making content, or start putting your opinion out there and having discussions. And yeah, whether it's on Twitter, if it's on Reddit, LinkedIn, YouTube, if you write articles on like dev.to, or if you write articles on Medium, or whatever you want to, I think being able to say, you've questioned me and you're questioning, like almost questioning my authority. Here is some examples that show that I do have the skills that you're questioning. I think we'll move on to this probably in the next episode, which is like how do you show your value? And I think if you're looking to create courses, if you're looking to make video tutorials or those kind of things, the best way of showing that you have those skills and building that authority is by having things out there in the world, having those discussions, making connections with people. And like, even for me being on this podcast, people will listen to this and go, oh, I heard Sam on that podcast. And he'll heard him on the podcast. That was a really interesting discussion. He obviously knows what he's talking about. Maybe that course might be quite good for me. And
exactly.
I think, it's the more feelers you put out there, the more ways you try and connect with people, and the more content you create, the easier it is to build that authority and build that trust with people who are going to take your tutorials and videos or whatever you want to make in the future.
Yeah, that's very great advice. That's just to start. All of us will start, and all of us started slowly with small things, and we grow our portfolio and grow our presence. That's really cool. Yeah, we will go to that. Right? You mentioned that, and this is another slight reference to the discussion about the certificate. So let's keep our audience still on the toes. And for my curiosity, and probably for the curiosity of the audience, you started this, let's say, training stuff, and then complete coding came to the picture, right? So it was like a natural evolution for you to go into this direction and say, right, so now I will do this for life or whatever.
So complete coding started as just the YouTube channel, and kind of it was just teaching people how to do serverless things. And kind of the consulting was actually initially by accident. It was literally people like CTOs or founders going, we've watched a video, we managed to get halfway through what we're trying to build, but we need to build the second half and you don't have a video on that yet. Can you come and spend a day with us trying to build out the next functionality, or give us or help us with the architecture so our developers can build that out? And initially it was just like one-off things, and over time I've built some more relationships with founders which are longer term. So I'm working kind of as a fractional CTO with about 3 different startups across the world, and trying to just help them make the most of serverless. Because I think, especially for startups, serverless basically, I wouldn't say shortcuts, but it just means that you don't have to go down the path of server management, server orchestration, redundancy. It resolves so many security issues that actually, because AWS is handling all of that, you don't need to consider that. And one of the startups I have worked with had to go through the security checks for handling card payment details. And we looked at if we did it with EC2 based solutions, it was like, I think there's like 76 criteria you need to meet. Some of those are like physical hardware requirements, like you have a monitored facility, so EC2 covers those. But it was something like 70% of the require, or 60% of the require, no, yeah, 70% of the requirements you still had to handle. With serverless, it was about 42%. So it meant that you're handling less than half of the security requirements because, and that those kind of things, and also just the speed of development, you can build out features in a matter of days. Like Jan Shui always talks about how he built a social media platform in 4 weeks on his own. And those kind of things just wouldn't be possible if you were building, let's call it a more traditional architecture. So if you can put out twice as many features, if you can put out twice as many updates as your competitor, that's going to mean you're going to grow twice as fast and that you're going to become a better product even quicker. And I think any startup out there that isn't using or isn't trying to be serverless first is missing a massive trick. And
that is true. That is true. And what you said about this, let's say, speed of creating MVP and testing the hypothesis. This is something what serverless helps a lot, right? And also, I tend to say to people when explaining different compute models and things like that, that because there is very often the question, how secure will there be the solution in some vendor? So generally, we can say really however, doesn't matter how much you will try, they still will have more the security certificates than you can have about the physical security, etc., etc., etc. Especially that was something what I observed, and this fits exactly what you said. After ChatGPT was released and those whole elements related to OpenAI, we saw a lot of small products, sometimes small, sometimes a little bit bigger, and I think you know what I'm referring to, where exactly this approach was tested, just to prove the concept without huge investment. And I would like to hear a little bit more about exactly this from you, if you,
definitely.
of course, can share.
Yeah, so I think, get MVP as fast as possible, especially when you're a small startup, and you're even better if you're not a funded startup, is kind of the best way. It's like, if you can get something in your users' hands and get feedback, then you're going to be making your product better. I've done this before. I've spent 6 months, like weekends and evenings, building out a product, put it out into the world, got, I think, 4 or 5 free users, and no one wanted to pay for it because it wasn't useful enough. So what I decided this year was I was going to try and do the opposite. I was going to try and launch and have a revenue generating business within 30 days. And obviously serverless made this possible because like the actual code and the implementation of the core functionality of this application, which for anyone that's listening and doesn't know, I built an application that allows you to go through LinkedIn and click a button. It will read the text of whatever LinkedIn post you want to comment on. It will then automatically generate a appropriate response to that, and you can customize it and things with some settings. And then it will paste that into the comment box where you can then tweak it a little bit, make it more you, and then send, which basically just speeds up the time it requires to engage on LinkedIn posts, which for anyone that's a LinkedIn nerd, a little bit like me, it can help boost your own posts by commenting on other people's. So I built this and I think I had my first users within 8 days of coming up with the idea. And within 17 days of coming up with the idea, I had my first income. It was $30, but it was a $30 a month subscription. And that kind of proved that people were not only willing to use it, because by that point, I think I had 200 free users, but I also had people that were willing to pay money. So that meant that I was justified in spending some more time and some more effort building out more features, building out the product, because I knew it was something that could become a startup. That product is still running today. It's more on maintenance mode at the moment because there's a lot of other competitors that have jumped in with a lot more money and a lot more time to try and do something similar. But yeah, the concept is just getting feedback from your actual customers, getting payments. Like it's all well and good going to your auntie and uncle and going, "Oh, would you use this?" And they go, "Oh, it's a lovely idea. Of course I would." But the ultimate form of validation is cash in hand.
Oh,
And
yes.
yeah, serverless can
Yeah.
really help you get there a lot faster.
Yeah. By the way, it is a really nice tool, and I use it from time to time just to see how it goes. And I observed this from the beginning, with really hoping that it will be successful for you, because this was also the proof what we said. So people out there, if you are listening to this podcast, you see 17 days, right? You said
Yep.
17 days for the idea, and on my another podcast we agreed that the best ideas are coming to us on the toilet. I don't know how it came to you, but I will not ask you. And with this very important question about ideas and where they come to us, we end this episode where we had a great opportunity and great pleasure to have Sam Williams with us. And I'm looking forward for the next episode in 1 week, where we will continue our discussion with Sam. This time we will touch the topic of the certifications. Stay tuned and see you very soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DevOps in Agile Way podcast with your host, Pawel. Subscribe, comment, and do not forget to check our next episodes. Stay tuned. Stay safe. Stay curious.